History is not a story we already know. A single artifact can shatter our most basic assumptions about human civilization. I want to share with you 40 unexplained archaeological finds that did far more than add footnotes to our history books. These discoveries tore out entire chapters and wrote completely new ones. By the end of this, you will see the past not as a straight line, but as a tapestry of mysteries we are still learning to read. We will examine an ancient computer found in a shipwreck and a map that seems to show Antarctica free of ice. How could a complex mechanical device exist 2,000 years ago? What lost civilization could have charted a continent buried under ice for millions of years? Each find is a puzzle piece that does not fit the picture we were taught. They whisper of forgotten technologies, societies that vanished without a trace, and connections across the ancient world that defy our textbooks. This journey will change how you see human progress forever. What part of our history do you think is most vulnerable to being rewritten? That dialogue with the past often begins not with a grand monument, but with a whisper from the deep. The seafloor holds countless secrets, and sometimes it chooses to speak through the wreckage of a ship that sank over 2,000 years ago. In the early 1900s, sponge divers working off the coast of a Greek island called Antikythera stumbled upon a sunken Roman cargo vessel. Among the statues and pottery recovered was a single, unassuming lump of corroded bronze and wood. For decades, it sat in a museum drawer, dismissed as a piece of nautical debris. It looked like nothing more than a rock, a forgotten cog in a mechanism long since silenced by the sea. But that unassuming lump would become the single most important artifact for rewriting our understanding of ancient technological capability. When researchers finally looked closer, they realized it was not a rock at all. It was a machine. X-ray imaging revealed an intricate clockwork of precisely cut bronze gears, some with teeth so fine they could have been made by a master watchmaker. This was the Antikythera Mechanism. Its purpose, after years of painstaking study, left the scientific world stunned. It was an astronomical computer. By turning a hand crank, one could predict the positions of the sun, moon, and planets, track the cycles of the Olympic Games, and even forecast lunar and solar eclipses with remarkable accuracy. Here was a device of staggering mechanical complexity, a technology we believe did not emerge until the Renaissance, over 1,000 years after this ship went down. Its very existence forces a profound and humbling question. If this is what a single Roman cargo ship was carrying, what other wonders were being created, traded, and ultimately lost in the ancient world? The Antikythera Mechanism is not just an artifact, it is a message. It tells us that our ancestors were not merely primitive, they were pioneers of engineering whose full story remains hidden beneath the waves and the soil. The diver's hands, brushing away centuries of sediment, had no idea he was touching a ghost. That corroded lump of bronze and wood recovered from the Roman shipwreck near Antikythera was a relic so out of place it was initially ignored. It was only decades later, with the advent of X-ray technology, that its true nature was violently unveiled. Inside that unassuming shell was a labyrinth of interlocking gears, some with teeth cut with a precision that would challenge a modern instrument maker. This was not an ornament or a simple tool. It was a machine, an analog computer built to model the cosmos. By turning a hand crank, its user could track the complex dance of the sun and moon, predict planetary positions, and even forecast the dates of lunar and solar eclipses. The date of its creation, around 100 years before the Common Era, sends a shockwave through the timeline of human innovation. Here was a device demonstrating a grasp of mechanical calculation and astronomical cycles that historians were certain did not emerge until the clock towers of medieval Europe over 1,000 years later. The Antikythera Mechanism does not simply add a footnote about Greek engineering. It rewrites the entire chapter on ancient technological ambition. Its existence implies a thriving tradition of precision mechanics, a school of thought and craftsmanship that has since vanished from the historical record. We are left staring at this solitary survivor, this one magnificent echo, and we must ask a haunting question. If this is what one ship was carrying, what other marvels of that lost technical lineage were created, used, and ultimately forgotten? The mechanism stands as a silent testament to a peak of ingenuity whose fall we do not fully understand, pushing us to look for other examples of ancient precision hiding in plain sight. That single, intricate machine from a shipwreck forces us to reconsider what ancient hands were capable of building. But what if those same hands were not just telling time by the stars, but also harnessing a fundamental force of nature, a force we would not formally understand for nearly 2 millennia? In the storage rooms of Iraq's National Museum, a collection of mundane objects tells a story that is anything but ordinary. A simple clay jar about the size of a fist. Inside it, a carefully placed copper cylinder, and within that, an iron rod. The jar's opening was sealed with asphalt, a perfect insulator. These artifacts were excavated from a Parthian-era site near Baghdad, dating back roughly 2,000 years. They look for all the world like the components of a basic chemical battery. And when modern researchers filled such a reconstructed vessel with an acidic electrolyte, like vinegar or grape juice, something remarkable happened. It produced a small but measurable electric charge around 1 volt. This assembly is known today as the Baghdad Battery. Its discovery immediately ignited fierce debate. What possible use could a 2,000-year-old society have for a trickle of electricity? Some theorists suggest it could have been used for electroplating, applying a thin layer of gold or silver onto objects, a practice known in the region. Others propose it might have served a medical purpose, perhaps for mild analgesic effects, a concept documented in ancient Greek and Roman texts. There are even interpretations that see it as part of a ritual or religious object, a way to create a mysterious tingle during ceremonial practices. The true purpose may never be known for certain, and many archaeologists remain skeptical of the battery interpretation. Yet, the artifact's simple, effective design is undeniably compelling. It stands as a tangible, physical question. It suggests the principle of the galvanic cell, the foundation of the modern battery, might not have been an 18th century discovery by Volta, but an accidental or intentional discovery lost to time and buried in the sands of Mesopotamia. Whether a tool, a toy, or a temple object, the Baghdad Battery whispers of experimentation, of a playful and profound curiosity about the natural world that we often reserve only for modern scientists. It opens a window not onto a world of advanced technology, but onto one of sophisticated observation and trial, where the boundaries between science, craft, and spirituality were beautifully blurred. This curiosity about the natural world extends far beyond hidden currents of electricity, reaching back to the very dawn of human creativity and leaving a mark that defies all expectation. From a possible ancient battery to a genuine modern spark plug found in a place it should never be, the line between discovery and mystery grows ever thinner. In the winter of 1961, 3 rock collectors were searching the dry landscape of California's Coso Mountains. They cracked open what seemed to be a promising geode, a round stone that should have held only beautiful crystals inside. Instead, they found an object that would become legendary. Encased within the stone was a cylinder of ceramic and metal, with a rusted iron core and what looked like a copper sheath. To their eyes, it resembled nothing so much as a contemporary spark plug. The astonishing claim was not just the object itself, but the age of the nodule that held it. The collectors insisted the concretion was around 500,000 years old, a date that would place this mechanical item deep in the Pleistocene epoch, a time of early humans and mammoths. The so-called Coso Artifact instantly became a sensation. It was the perfect out-of-place artifact, an OOP art, an object that appeared technologically advanced and utterly anachronistic in its supposed context. It fueled endless speculation. Was it evidence of a prehistoric advanced civilization, one that mastered internal combustion long before recorded history? Could it be a relic from visitors not of this earth, left behind and slowly fossilized over eons? The public imagination ran wild, seeing in this strange lump a key to rewriting everything. The scientific community, however, was deeply skeptical. Later, more rigorous analysis suggested a far more mundane, yet still fascinating, explanation. The object was almost certainly a champion spark plug from the 1920s. The geode was not a natural crystal formation, but a hard concretion of rust and minerals that had built up around the plug over mere decades in the mineral-rich soil. The mystery, in a strict sense, was solved, yet the legacy of the Coso artifact is profound. It remains a cornerstone case study in how we interpret anomalies. It underscores the powerful human desire to find evidence of the extraordinary and the critical importance of rigorous evidence standards. The initial fervor it sparked forced archaeologists and historians to repeatedly explain the processes of concretion and the dangers of mistaking context. This single, misidentified object ignited a global conversation about proof, belief, and the boundaries of accepted history. It teaches us that sometimes the greatest mystery is not the artifact itself, but our own relentless need for it to be something it is not. Yet this urge to find the impossible in the past pushes us to look harder at other objects whose explanations are not so easily settled, where the context is clearer and the anomaly far more stubborn. The desire to find an impossible object is a powerful force, and few artifacts embody that longing more than the London hammer. In 1936, near the town of London, Texas, a couple walking along a creek made a startling discovery. Partially embedded in a large, solid chunk of rock was a hammer. Not just any hammer, but one with a recognizable wooden handle and a distinct iron head, seemingly swallowed whole by the stone. The rock itself was identified as Cretaceous sandstone, a formation dating back well over 100 million years. The immediate implication was staggering. This was an era of dinosaurs long before any primate, let alone a human being, could have walked the earth and crafted a tool. The image is undeniably compelling, a perfect snapshot of an anachronism. How could a clearly human-made object be imprisoned in stone from a prehistoric age? It became an instant icon for those challenging mainstream science, a physical emblem suggesting our timelines of human history and even planetary geology might be profoundly wrong. Geologists, however, point to a more plausible, if less dramatic, process. They suggest the hammer is likely a 19th-century miner's tool that was dropped or left behind. Over time, mineral-rich waters in the creek could have precipitated a hard, stone-like concretion around it, a process that can happen relatively quickly in the right conditions. The concretion, not the surrounding bedrock, is what encased the hammer. Yet, the power of the London hammer lies not in its likely scientific explanation, but in the questions it forces into the open. It represents the eternal tension between an extraordinary claim and the need for ordinary evidence. It asks us to scrutinize not just the object, but our own interpretations. Are we seeing a mystery that rewrites history, or are we witnessing the remarkable but natural artistry of geological processes? This artifact stands at the crossroads of two very human stories, one of revolutionary discovery and one of patient, incremental understanding. It challenges us to hold both possibilities in mind, to marvel at the object while rigorously questioning its context. From a single tool that seems lost in deep time, we shift our gaze to an entire continent charted with impossible accuracy, a map that captures a world no human eye should have seen. But a single misplaced tool is one thing. An entire misplaced continent on a map is another matter entirely. In the Topkapi Palace Museum in Istanbul rests a fragment of a world map drawn on gazelle skin in the year 1513 by the Ottoman admiral and cartographer Piri Reis. It is a beautiful and technically impressive document for its time, showing the Atlantic with the coastlines of West Africa and the eastern bulge of South America with surprising accuracy. Yet it is the landmass at the bottom of the map that has ignited decades of fierce debate and rewriting. There, below the Atlantic, the map depicts a long, detailed coastline. Piri Reis himself wrote notes on the map stating he had compiled it from many source charts, including some he described as dating back to the time of Alexander the Great. The controversial landmass bears a startling resemblance to the northern coastline of Queen Maud Land in Antarctica, a continent that would not be officially discovered by European explorers for another 300 years. The geological impossibility is staggering. Antarctica has been buried under a mile-thick sheet of ice for millions of years. Its true, rocky coastline has been completely invisible to human eyes since long before our species evolved. So what is shown on the Piri Reis map, mainstream scholars offer a compelling alternative. They suggest the mysterious land is likely a distorted composite of the southern coast of South America, perhaps blended with speculative geography or even a lost peninsula from ancient source maps. The map's own notations support this idea of compilation and possible error, yet the haunting resemblance to a hidden coastline persists. This single piece of parchment fuels a profound and tantalizing theory. It suggests that the so-called Age of Discovery in the 15th and 16th centuries was not a beginning but a rediscovery. It hints at the existence of a lost cartographic tradition, perhaps from a seafaring civilization like the Minoans or Phoenicians, who may have charted parts of the world in a warmer prehistoric epoch when Antarctica's coasts were perhaps less shrouded. Whether a cartographic mistake or a ghost of ancient knowledge, the Piri Reis map does one thing irrevocably. It shatters the Eurocentric narrative that the world was fully unknown before Columbus and Magellan. It places the Ottoman Empire firmly in the center of global geographical knowledge and forces us to ask what other maps from what other great libraries were lost to fire, decay, or conquest. This idea of a sophisticated, planned world is not confined to charts. It becomes physical, breathtakingly so, in the ruins of a city that feels both impossibly ancient and eerily modern. The Piri Reis map hints at a world once better known, but the ruins of Mohenjo-Daro prove it, uncovered in the 1920s along the banks of the Indus River in modern Pakistan. This is not a collection of primitive huts. It is a metropolis, a bustling city from 2,500 years before the Common Era that feels, in its planning, almost familiar to our modern eyes. Walking its excavated streets, you are struck not by ancient mystery, but by a profound sense of order. The roads run in a precise grid pattern, a master plan laid down centuries before the rise of classical Greece or Rome. The buildings are constructed from standardized, kiln-fired bricks of uniform size, a testament to centralized authority and mass production. But the true genius of Mohenjo-Daro lies beneath the surface. The city possessed one of the world's first comprehensive urban sanitation systems. Homes were connected to a network of covered drains that channeled waste away from living areas with manholes for maintenance access. This was not a luxury, it was a civic standard, a clear priority for public health in a densely populated urban center. This level of sophistication forces a complete revision of the history of civilization. For a long time, the story of human progress was a narrative centered on Mesopotamia and Egypt. Mohenjo-Daro, along with its sister city Harappa, shatters that narrow view. It reveals a third, completely independent cradle of civilization in South Asia, one that achieved a remarkably balanced and organized urban life without the giant pyramids or ziggurats we associate with ancient power. Their power was expressed in cleanliness, order, and astonishing equality in housing. Yet, for all its physical clarity, the Indus Valley civilization guards its secrets fiercely. Its written script, found on thousands of small seals, remains undeciphered, a locked door to their language, their thoughts, and their history. We do not know what they called their city, their leaders, or their gods. Even more puzzling is their disappearance. Around 1900 BC, this meticulously planned society began to decline. The reasons are still debated, with theories pointing to shifts in the river's course, changes in climate patterns, or perhaps the arrival of new groups. They faded away, leaving behind their impeccably engineered streets as a silent challenge to later history. Mohenjo-Daro rewrites the book by proving that advanced, complex urban living is not the invention of one region or one people, but a human idea that can flower independently, given the right conditions. It shows us a path to civilization built on plumbing and planning rather than pyramids, a vision of antiquity that feels unexpectedly modern and deeply humane. This concept of independent innovation raises an even more foundational question. What if the very first steps toward civilization were taken not in the fertile river valleys we know, but on a remote, windswept plateau in Turkey, over 6,000 years before Mohenjo-Daro was even founded? The meticulously planned streets of Mohenjo-Daro represent a pinnacle of urban civilization, but they are not its origin. To find the true genesis of organized human society, we must travel much further back in time, to a barren hilltop in southeastern Turkey known as Göbekli Tepe. Here, there are no streets, no houses, no signs of a city at all. Instead, standing against the sky are enormous rings of massive stone pillars, each one intricately carved with elaborate depictions of animals, foxes, snakes, scorpions, and birds of prey. The sheer scale is breathtaking, with some pillars weighing over 10 tons. But the truly revolutionary fact is not their size, but their age. This site was constructed around 9600 BCE. That is over 11,500 years ago. To grasp that distance, consider this: Göbekli Tepe was already ancient when the first stones of Stonehenge were laid, a gap of more than 6,000 years. It was built millennia before the invention of pottery, before the smelting of metal, before the wheel. According to everything we thought we knew about human prehistory, this should be impossible. The established narrative was clear and logical. First, humans discovered agriculture. Farming provided a stable, surplus food supply. That surplus allowed people to settle down in permanent villages. Only then, with the leisure and resources that settlement provided, could they develop complex social structures, specialized labor, and monumental architecture for ritual or religion. Göbekli Tepe shatters that sequence completely. There is no evidence of agriculture at the site. The people who built it were likely hunter-gatherers, nomadic bands following animal herds and foraging for wild plants. Yet they achieved a feat of social organization that defies belief. They quarried, carved, transported, and erected these colossal stones, a project requiring the coordinated labor of hundreds of people over generations. This was not a practical undertaking for survival, it was a spiritual one. The carvings are not utilitarian, they are symbolic, telling stories of a rich mythological world. Göbekli Tepe turns the standard model on its head. It suggests that the drive to come together for ritual, for a shared belief system, may have been the original catalyst. The need to feed large groups of people gathered at this sacred site for ceremonies could have provided the impetus to cultivate wild grains, to domesticate animals. In this radical new view, religion did not emerge from civilization. Civilization may have emerged from religion. This single site rewrites the prehistory of social complexity. pushing the origins of organized society and symbolic thought thousands of years further back into the mist of time. It reveals our ancestors not as simple survivors, but as visionaries who moved mountains of stone long before they planted a single seed, driven by a need to build meaning that was just as fundamental as the need for food. This profound human impulse to gather, to create, and to preserve knowledge would eventually lead to another monumental achievement, one dedicated not to stone but to the written word itself. While Göbekli Tepe reveals a world before writing, the power of the written word itself can lie hidden for centuries, waiting to correct the very stories we thought were fixed. In the hot, dry cliffs overlooking the Dead Sea in the late 1940s, a young Bedouin shepherd tossed a stone into a cave, hoping to flush out a lost goat. Instead, he heard the sound of breaking pottery. Climbing inside, he found a collection of large clay jars. Inside those jars were not treasures of gold or silver, but something far more precious to history, tightly rolled manuscripts of leather and papyrus. This accidental discovery began the recovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls, a library of over 900 documents dating from the 3rd century before the Common Era to the 1st century of the Common Era. Their significance cannot be overstated. They include the oldest known copies of the Hebrew Bible by 1,000 years, allowing scholars to see the textual foundations of Judaism and Christianity with unprecedented clarity. But the scrolls did much more than just confirm existing texts. They rewrote the history of a turbulent and formative era known as the Second Temple period. Before their discovery, our understanding of Jewish religious life at the dawn of the Common Era was limited, viewed largely through later rabbinic writings or the New Testament. The scrolls shattered that monolithic view. They revealed a landscape of vibrant religious diversity, of multiple Jewish communities and sects, each with its own interpretations, rituals, and expectations. Among the texts were previously unknown psalms, detailed community rules, apocalyptic visions, and commentaries that showed intense theological debate was the norm, not the exception. This was the intellectual and spiritual soil from which both early Christianity and rabbinic Judaism would grow. The scrolls showed that biblical texts were still fluid in some details, with fascinating variations that help us understand how these sacred writings were copied, preserved, and interpreted over time. They also preserved works that had been completely lost to history, books like the Community Rule and the War Scroll, which outline the beliefs and practices of a devout, ascetic group many scholars associate with the Essenes. The discovery forced a complete reassessment of a pivotal crossroads in religious history. It moved our understanding from a simple story to a complex, multifaceted conversation happening in the desert, recorded on scrolls and sealed in jars against the dry air. The Dead Sea Scrolls are a profound reminder that history is not a single book passed down perfectly, but a puzzle whose most important pieces are sometimes tucked away in caves, waiting for a stray stone to find them. This idea of messages left for the future takes on a staggering scale when the canvas is not a scrap of parchment, but an entire Peruvian mountainside, and the message is a drawing so vast it can only be comprehended from the heavens. High above the desert floor, a spider with legs stretching nearly 150 feet across the sand becomes visible. This is not a living creature, but one of the hundreds of enigmatic drawings known as the Nazca Lines. Scattered across a vast, arid plateau in southern Peru, these geoglyphs form a sprawling gallery of staggering scale and mystery, created by removing the dark, sun-baked surface stones to reveal the lighter-colored earth beneath. The lines depict a stunning array of forms. There are hummingbirds with long, delicate beaks, a monkey with a spiraling tail, a colossal condor, intricate geometric shapes like trapezoids and spirals, and even a strange, humanoid figure often called the astronaut. The technical achievement is mind-boggling. These designs are so immense, some spanning over 900 feet, that their coherent form can only be fully appreciated from the air. This simple fact has fueled endless speculation. How, and more importantly why, would a culture that existed between 500 years before the Common Era and 500 years after create art they could never see? The theories are as vast as the drawings themselves. Some researchers propose they were a giant astronomical calendar, aligning with solstices or constellations to mark planting seasons. Others see them as sacred pathways for ritual processions, walked by priests to communicate with deities of water and fertility in this desperately dry land. The more speculative ideas suggest they were landing markers or messages for visitors from beyond our world. While the extraterrestrial hypothesis captures the imagination, archaeologists point to simpler, yet no less brilliant methods. Using stakes, ropes, and a master plan scaled up from smaller sketches, the Nazca people demonstrated a profound understanding of geometry and spatial organization. They executed projects that required coordinated labor over generations, a testament to a sophisticated and patient society. The true purpose likely wove together many threads, blending astronomy, religion, and social cohesion. They were a monumental act of faith, etched into the very skin of the earth to ensure the continuity of life in a harsh environment. The Nazca Lines rewrite history by forcing us to expand our definition of art, engineering, and communication. They are a testament to a culture that thought in grand, enduring scales, creating messages not for themselves, but for the gods, the sky, and the future. This human drive to leave a mark, to communicate meaning across time, finds an even more intimate and breathtaking expression not on a sun-baked plain, but in the silent, dark depths of a cave. Deep within a limestone cliff in southern France, a sealed passageway hid a gallery of frozen time for over 30,000 years. In 1994, 3 cave explorers felt a draft of air from a pile of fallen rocks. Crawling through a narrow tunnel, they entered a vast, pristine chamber, and their headlamps illuminated a vision that stopped their breath. This was Chauvet Cave. The walls were alive with a magnificent bestiary of the Ice Age, painted with a sophistication that defied all expectation. Herds of woolly rhinoceroses locked in combat, lions on the hunt with a palpable sense of movement, galloping horses captured in mid-stride, and even the now extinct megaloceros, a giant deer with sweeping antlers. The artists had used the natural contours of the rock to give their subjects volume and depth, a masterful use of perspective. They employed techniques like shading and stump blending to create stunning realism. But the most staggering fact is the date. These are not mere sketches, they are masterpieces, and they were created approximately 36,000 years ago. That is nearly twice the age of the famous paintings at Lascaux. This single discovery obliterated the comforting, linear narrative of human artistic progress, the idea that early art was crude and slowly became refined over millennia. Chauvet tells a different story. It reveals that the very first Homo sapiens to arrive in Europe possessed a fully formed capacity for complex symbolic thought, narrative storytelling, and breathtaking artistic skill. This was not the dawn of art, it was a flourishing. The cave itself was used not as a dwelling but seemingly as a sacred space, visited over generations. The placement of the paintings, the use of chambers, and the footprints left in the soft clay floor suggest ritual, ceremony, a deep connection to the world they depicted. Chauvet rewrites the timeline of our cognitive and cultural development, proving that the spark of genius, the urge to create meaning and beauty, ignited in our species not as a slow burn, but as a brilliant, sudden flame. This cave is a time capsule, not of primitive struggle, but of Ice Age genius, a reminder that the minds that looked out at a world of mammoths and glaciers were minds capable of profound artistry and reverence. Yet if these paintings capture a world in vibrant life, another ancient artifact seems to record a moment of its violent end. a stone slab that may be humanity's oldest known eyewitness account of a cosmic disaster. The walls of Chauvet Cave capture a world in vibrant, living motion, but another ancient image, carved in stone rather than painted, has been interpreted as capturing something else entirely, a glimpse of forbidden knowledge. Within the crypt of the Hathor Temple at Dendera, Egypt, a 2,000-year-old stone relief presents a scene that looks, to modern eyes, eerily familiar. It shows a large, elongated object shaped like a bulbous vase. Inside this object, a snake extends along its length. The snake is held in place by a pillar, and the entire assembly is connected by what appears to be a cable to a box, which is held by a kneeling figure. A second figure stands nearby, as if operating or guarding the device. To anyone living in the age of electricity, the interpretation leaps off the wall. It looks unmistakably like a giant light bulb, with the snake serving as the glowing filament, the pillar as the socket, the cable as the wiring, and the box as a power source or battery. This is the so-called Dendera Light, and it has become a cornerstone of alternative historical theories, suggesting the ancient Egyptians possessed electrical technology. The mainstream explanation from Egyptologists is profoundly different and rooted in mythology. They identify the scene as a symbolic representation of creation. The bulbous object is not a lamp, but a lotus flower emerging from the primordial waters. The snake is the deity Harsomptus, a manifestation of the sun god being born from the lotus, a classic Egyptian symbol for the dawn and the daily rebirth of the sun. The pillar is the divine pillar of Edfu, a symbol of stability, and the kneeling figure is the god Her, representing infinity. The box is likely a ceremonial vessel. This interpretation fits seamlessly within the rich tapestry of Egyptian religious iconography. Yet, the power of the Dendera Light theory lies not in its archaeological credibility, but in the profound questions it raises about perception. It forces a vital conversation about the boundaries between mythology and metaphor. Could a culture describe a force as abstract as electricity only through the symbolic language they possessed, using serpents to represent crackling energy and flowers to represent containment? Or are we, as modern viewers, hopelessly projecting our own technological world onto a spiritual one? This single relief acts as a mirror, reflecting our own desire to find ourselves in the past. It challenges us to consider whether ancient symbols could hold layered meanings, serving both a religious purpose and encoding a practical understanding of natural phenomena. The Dendera Light may not prove the existence of ancient light bulbs, but it powerfully demonstrates how our contemporary lens can completely reshape and sometimes rewrite our reading of ancient intent. It is a reminder that the past speaks in a foreign language, and the most tantalizing mysteries often arise when we mistake its poetry for a technical manual. This search for understanding in stone leads us from a single, debated carving to an entire city preserved in a single, catastrophic moment, a place where the poetry of daily life was frozen in ash. The frozen poetry of Pompeii gives us a moment, but the silent guardians of Xi'an offer an eternity. In the spring of 1974, farmers digging a well near the city of Xi'an, China, struck not water but a hardened clay shoulder. As they cleared the earth, a life-sized terracotta soldier stared back, perfectly preserved. This chance discovery unveiled the sprawling mausoleum complex of Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor who unified China in the late 3rd century before the Common Era. What they found was not a tomb filled with treasures of gold, but with an army. Not a symbolic handful of statues, but a vast, silent legion of over 8,000 soldiers, each one life-sized and astonishingly detailed, accompanied by hundreds of chariots and horses. The scale is almost incomprehensible. This was a project of staggering ambition that required the labor of an estimated 700,000 workers over nearly 4 decades. The army was arranged in precise military formation, ready to defend their emperor in the afterlife, a concept of imperial power made terrifyingly tangible. But the true wonder lies in the details. While the bodies were assembled from standardized parts, every single soldier's face is unique. Archaeologists have identified distinct hairstyles, expressions, and even ethnic features, suggesting they were modeled after real members of the emperor's actual army. This pushes the discovery beyond a mere display of power into the realm of profound individual artistry on an industrial scale. The Terracotta Army rewrote history by providing undeniable physical proof of the Qin dynasty's unprecedented centralized control and its vast resources. It revealed a funerary practice of monumental scale previously unknown, shifting our understanding of early Chinese craftsmanship from theoretical to breathtakingly concrete. This silent clay host speaks to a universal human obsession, the desire to project power, identity, and legacy beyond the bounds of a single lifetime. It is a permanent echo of one man's will, but also a timeless monument to the countless nameless hands that shaped it. From an army of clay soldiers standing guard for millennia, we shift to a single, exquisite object of crystal whose purpose remains a beautiful enigma, an artifact that seems to capture light and knowledge in a single, perfect form. The silent, regimented army of Xi'an represents a known power, but a single, flawless object of crystal represents a power we cannot define. Among the most captivating and controversial artifacts to emerge from the early 20th century is the Mitchell-Hedges crystal skull. Popularized by the British adventurer F. A. Mitchell-Hedges, who claimed his daughter discovered it beneath a collapsed altar in a Mayan ruin in Belize in the 1920s, the skull is a masterpiece of carving. It is life-sized, crafted from a single block of clear quartz crystal, and its anatomical detail is astonishing, with a removable jawbone that fits perfectly. In an age of sensational archaeological discoveries, it captured the public imagination like few other objects. Legends swirled around it, suggesting it was a relic of Atlantis, a tool of ancient psychic power, or proof of a lost technology that could carve stone with sound or light. The mystery deepened because the skull showed no visible marks from modern metal tools, its surfaces polished to a supernatural smoothness. For decades, it stood as a unique enigma, a ghost from a forgotten world. However, the story of the crystal skull is also a story about archaeology's own growing pains. In the later 20th century, scientific analysis of similar crystal skulls in museum collections revealed a startling truth. Many were fabrications, likely carved in Europe in the 1800s using industrial lapidary equipment, then sold as exotic antiquities to collectors. The romantic narratives were often clever marketing. The Mitchell-Hedges skull itself has never been subjected to definitive, unrestricted testing, leaving its origin in a frustrating limbo. Is it a genuine, inexplicable pre-Columbian artifact of impossible craftsmanship, or simply the most exquisite and well-promoted forgery of them all? This unresolved question is precisely what makes it a pivotal find. The skull's legacy is not about proving ancient lasers or Atlantis, but about illuminating a shadowy chapter in the history of exploration itself. It embodies an era when the line between rigorous science and romantic myth-making was dangerously blurred, when the desire for the spectacular could sometimes outpace the demand for proof. The skull holds up a mirror to our own fascination with the mysterious, reminding us that sometimes the most compelling artifact is the one that tells us more about the seeker than the sought. This pursuit of the spectacular often leads deep into the jungle, where stone armies and crystal skulls give way to the overwhelming silence of a city reclaimed by the earth. A city does not need to be lost to hold profound secrets. The towering spires of Angkor Wat in Cambodia have never been hidden, their magnificent silhouette a symbol of national pride for centuries. But for a long time, we misunderstood what we were looking at. We saw a spectacular, isolated temple complex built by the Khmer Empire, a masterpiece of religious architecture surrounded by jungle. The truth, revealed by modern technology, is so much larger it defies belief. Using airborne laser scanning called LiDAR, researchers peered through the dense forest canopy starting in the early 2000s. What they mapped was not just a temple precinct, but the sprawling remains of the largest pre-industrial city on Earth. Greater Angkor was a vast, low-density metropolis covering an area roughly the size of modern Los Angeles, home to perhaps as many as 1 million people at its peak between the 9th and 15th centuries. This discovery alone rewrites the history of urban development in Southeast Asia, proving it was not a peripheral region but a powerhouse of innovation and organization. But the true genius of Angkor is not just in its scale, but in its relationship with water. The Khmer engineers were masters of hydraulic design. They constructed an intricate, city-wide network of massive reservoirs called barrays, canals, and moats that formed a giant, artificial watershed. This system was a work of breathtaking foresight. It captured the torrential monsoon rains, stored the water to survive the long dry season, and distributed it for agriculture, preventing both devastating floods and crippling droughts. The entire city was a machine for living, engineered in harmony with a challenging climate. Angkor's sophistication forces us to discard old ideas about isolated cultural centers. Here was a civilization whose urban planning and engineering prowess rivaled that of Rome or the Maya, a testament to human ingenuity flourishing in a landscape it had learned to shape and control. Its eventual decline, linked to shifts in climate and possible strain on this magnificent water system, adds a layer of poignant drama to its story. Angkor rewrites the book by showing that the roots of complex urban society are not confined to a few celebrated cradles, but can grow from the monsoon-soaked soils of Cambodia into something truly colossal. Yet, as we pull back from this vast, engineered landscape to peer into the depths of a single cave, we are reminded that the story of human development is not one line, but many, including branches we never knew existed. Deep within the almost impossibly narrow passages of the Rising Star Cave system in South Africa, a discovery was made that scrambled the map of our own origins. In 2013, paleoanthropologists, often working in cramped darkness, recovered over 1,500 fossil remains from a single chamber. These bones belong to a species never before seen, a hominin now called Homo naledi. The dating of these fossils sent a shock through the field, placing them between 236,000 and 335,000 years ago. This is a pivotal period, a time when only our own direct ancestors, Homo sapiens, were believed to be walking the African continent. Yet here was clear evidence of another kind of human, sharing the world with us far more recently than anyone had imagined. The physical form of Homo naledi presented a jarring mosaic of traits. They had small brains about a third the size of our own, suggesting a more primitive lineage. Yet their hands were structured for precision, their feet were almost indistinguishable from ours, and their bodies were built for long-distance walking. This combination defied the tidy, linear model of human evolution where bigger brains inevitably led to more modern bodies. But the most profound mystery lay in the context of the find itself. The Naledi chamber, where the bones were found, is located deep within the cave, accessible only via a treacherous, narrow chute. There are no signs that these individuals lived in the cave or were dragged there by predators. The leading and deeply controversial interpretation is that Homo naledi may have deliberately placed their companions in this remote chamber after their passing. This suggestion of a potential mortuary practice is revolutionary. For decades, such complex, symbolic behavior was considered the exclusive hallmark of large-brained humans like us, a cognitive threshold that smaller-brained species could not cross. Homo naledi challenges that assumption at its core. It forces a humbling and expansive rethink of the human family tree. Our story is not a simple march of progress from primitive to smart. It is a tangled bush of diversity, with many different kinds of human coexisting, experimenting, and potentially developing their own forms of social care and ritual meaning. This small-brained species living alongside our ancestors whispers that the spark of complex behavior, even reverence for those who have passed, may have ignited much earlier and in more minds than we ever dared to believe. If a species with a brain the size of an orange could potentially contemplate mortality, what other capacities have we arrogantly assumed belong only to us? This question of hidden capacity and cosmic awareness leads us from the depths of a South African cave to the surface of an ancient disk, where the stars themselves seem to have been charted with impossible precision. The stars charted by Homo naledi's descendants would one day be cast in bronze and gold. In 1999, German authorities arrested 2 looters who had been digging illegally on a hill called the Mittelberg. In their possession was an object so extraordinary it seemed to belong to another era entirely. A circular bronze disc about the size of a dinner plate inlaid with gold symbols. The symbols were not random. They depicted a cluster of 7 stars interpreted as the Pleiades, a crescent moon, a full sun or perhaps a full moon, and 2 golden arcs along the rim. Later, a 3rd arc was added, along with a mysterious golden shape at the bottom that many scholars believe represents a solar boat, a vessel carrying the sun across the sky, a motif known from ancient Egypt and Scandinavia. Scientific analysis dated this artifact, the Nebra Sky Disc, to approximately 1600 years before the Common Era, deep in the European Bronze Age. This was not a piece of jewelry or a ceremonial shield. It is now recognized as the oldest known portable instrument for astronomical observation in the world. Its purpose was likely profoundly practical and spiritual. Researchers believe it was a sophisticated calculator used to harmonize the lunar calendar with the solar year. By aligning the positions of the golden symbols with actual celestial events, the people who made it could predict the correct time to plant crops or hold religious festivals, ensuring their community remained in sync with the cosmos. This single object rewrote history with the force of a revelation. Before its discovery, the prevailing view of Bronze Age Central Europe was of a fragmented, relatively simple society of farmers and metalworkers. The Nebra Sky Disc shattered that assumption. It proved that nearly 4,000 years ago, people in the heart of Germany possessed not just astronomical knowledge, but the abstract thinking required to encode that knowledge into a permanent, symbolic map. It speaks of a shared cosmological understanding that stretched across the continent, hinting at trade in ideas as well as goods, connecting the forests of Germany to the wider ancient world. This disc is a frozen moment of human wonder, a testament to the universal urge to look up, find patterns, and hold the infinite sky in the palm of your hand. Yet for all its clarity as a celestial guide, it stands in stark contrast to another artifact whose symbols offer no such guidance, a book filled with writing that has stubbornly refused to reveal its meaning for centuries. The Nebra Sky Disc presents a language of stars we can finally understand, but another book from the past presents a language that defies all understanding. In the rare book library of Yale University rests a volume that has been called the world's most mysterious manuscript, purchased by a Polish book dealer named Wilfrid Voynich in 1912. This codex is a small, unassuming book of about 240 vellum pages, filled from edge to edge with elegant, looping handwriting in an alphabet no one has ever seen. Carbon dating confirms it was created in the early 15th century, somewhere in Central Europe, but that is where all certainty ends. The text, known as Voynichese, flows in a seemingly grammatical structure, with recognizable word and sentence patterns, yet it corresponds to no known language on Earth. For over a century, the world's top cryptographers, including teams that broke Nazi codes during the Second World War, have applied every conceivable analytical method to crack its cipher. All have failed. The manuscript's content is just as baffling as its script. It is richly illustrated with paintings that only deepen the mystery. There are pages upon pages of botanical drawings featuring plants that do not exist, their roots and leaves fantastical composites of known flora. There are intricate astronomical charts showing unfamiliar constellations and celestial diagrams. Perhaps most strikingly, there are numerous illustrations of nude female figures, often depicted bathing in or connected by tubes to a strange, green, networked fluid. These sections have been dubbed the biological or balneological pages, and their meaning is utterly opaque. The theories about its origin are as varied as they are compelling. Some believe it is an elaborate, invented hoax from the Renaissance, a meaningless text created to defraud a wealthy patron. Others argue it is a coded treatise on herbal medicine or alchemy, protecting secret knowledge. A more recent hypothesis suggests it could be written in a constructed, artificial language or in a highly abbreviated form of a known tongue. The Voynich Manuscript is a perfect storm of historical enigma. It is not a buried artifact or a ruined city. It is a complete, preserved book that sits in plain sight, openly mocking our modern certainty that we can recover and comprehend the past. It challenges the very foundation of historical scholarship, which relies on the decipherment of texts. Here is a document from a period we know well, the European Middle Ages, and yet it feels utterly alien, a message deliberately or accidentally locked in a linguistic vault for which the key has been lost. It stands as a profound and humbling reminder that some chapters of human thought may remain forever closed to us, their wisdom, their nonsense, or their beauty silently preserved on a page no living person can read. This tangible mystery of captured, untranslatable energy leads us to consider stones believed by some to hold a very different kind of ancient power. The silent language of the Voynich Manuscript remains locked, but on the wind-swept coast of Brittany, an entire landscape speaks in a vocabulary of stone. The Carnac alignments are not a single monument, but a vast, sprawling complex of over 3,000 individual megaliths standing in eerie, regimented rows that stretch for miles across the countryside. Erected by Neolithic communities beginning around 4,500 years before the Common Era, these stones are not haphazardly placed. They are arranged with clear intention, forming parallel lines, semicircles, and giant enclosures that transform the earth itself into a geometric canvas. To walk among them is to feel a profound sense of order imposed by hands that worked millennia before the pyramids of Egypt were even conceived. The sheer scale of the labor is staggering, each stone dragged, lifted, and set by a society we often think of as simple farmers. This was not the work of a lone chieftain, but of a culture with a powerful, unified vision and the social organization to see it through across generations. But for what purpose? The silence of the stones has bred a symphony of theories. Some researchers see a gigantic astronomical observatory, with certain alignments pointing to the solstice sun or major lunar standstills, turning the land into a calendar under the open sky. Others propose they acted as a form of territorial marker or a sacred space for seasonal gatherings and rites of passage. More speculative ideas suggest they could have served as seismic detectors, with the stones resonating during earth tremors, or even as symbolic representations of deities or ancestral spirits frozen in granite. The truth may weave together many of these threads. The Carnac Stones rewrite the narrative of prehistoric Europe by demonstrating a capacity for landscape-scale planning and communal effort that rivals the great cathedral builders of the Middle Ages. They reveal a society deeply connected to their environment, investing immense energy not in fortifications or palaces, but in aligning the earth with the cosmos and the spirit world. This monumental patience, this drive to etch belief into the very bedrock, shows a sophistication of mind that goes far beyond survival. It is a declaration that meaning for these ancient people was found not in what they could take from the land, but in what they could give back to it through enduring stone. While these granite sentinels stand defiant against the elements, another artifact from antiquity presents a different kind of defiance, one not against weather, but against time's most persistent chemical thief. A monument's defiance is not always in its size, but in its silent endurance. In the heart of Delhi, India, within the historic Quad complex, stands a slender iron column that has watched empires rise and fall for over 16 centuries. Erected around the 4th century of the Common Era during the reign of the Gupta Empire, the iron pillar of Delhi rises nearly 7 meters high. On its surface, an inscription praises a king named Chandra, likely Chandragupta II. But the pillar's true marvel is not the words it bears, but the metal from which it is made. In a city known for its humidity and monsoon rains, this ancient iron structure shows almost no sign of rust. It stands clean and dark against the sky, a phenomenon that baffled scientists for generations. Modern metallurgical analysis finally unlocked the secret. The artisans of the Gupta period used a unique forging process, creating an iron alloy with an unusually high phosphorus content and very low sulfur. Over time, this specific recipe allowed a thin, protective layer of iron hydrogen phosphate to form on the pillar's surface. This passive layer acts as a shield, preventing the corrosive chemical reactions that cause ordinary iron to crumble into reddish flakes. This was not an accident, but a sophisticated understanding of materials science achieved over 1,000 years before the process was formally described in the West. The pillar is a masterpiece of ancient engineering, a testament to a level of craft and chemical intuition that seems to belong to a much later age. It challenges the linear narrative of technological progress, suggesting that peaks of specialized knowledge could be reached, celebrated, and then tragically forgotten, only to be painstakingly rediscovered millennia later. This iron sentinel is not merely an artifact, it is a question cast in metal. How many other formulas for durability, for beauty, for innovation were perfected by ancient hands and then lost to the turning pages of time? It represents a brilliant flash of understanding that glowed brightly before the historical record dimmed. From this rust-defying monument of solid, understood science, we journey to a threshold of solid stone that seems to defy something far greater, the very laws of physics, standing as a potential portal to another realm of understanding. The rust-defying pillar of Delhi stands as a testament to a mastered craft, but in the thin air of the Bolivian Andes, a different kind of mastery is etched into a doorway that leads nowhere. At the ancient site of Tiwanaku, nearly 13,000 feet above sea level, rests the Gate of the Sun. Carved from a single, colossal block of andesite stone weighing many tons, this monolithic arch is a canvas of profound mystery. Its surface is covered in intricate, low-relief carvings, dominated by a central, imposing figure with a radiant headdress, often identified as the creator god Viracocha. This figure holds staffs that end in condor heads, and from its eyes flow what appear to be tears. Surrounding this central deity are 48 smaller, winged figures, 32 with human faces and 16 with condor heads, all seeming to run toward the central god in symmetrical reverence. The precision of this iconography is matched only by the physical precision of the gate itself. The stone cutting exhibits perfectly straight grooves and symmetrically drilled holes, achievements that seem to defy the technological capabilities of a culture that did not use iron tools. The andesite stone is notoriously hard, yet the Tiwanaku artisans worked it with a skill that appears almost supernatural. But the gate is more than a sculpture, it is a potential celestial instrument. Researchers believe it was originally part of a larger structure, and its placement and certain features suggest sophisticated astronomical alignments, possibly linked to solstices or the tracking of Venus. The entire composition may be a complex calendar or a cosmological map, encoding the Tiwanaku understanding of time, divinity, and the structure of the universe. The civilization that created it flourished between 500 and 1,000 years after the Common Era, a major power in the southern Andes long before the Inca. Yet, like the gate's meaning, much of their history has been lost. The Gate of the Sun stands as a silent stone question. It is a portal not to another room, but to the mind of a civilization that could conceive of eternity, measure the heavens, and carve their vision into a mountain with tools we can scarcely comprehend. This monumental act of commemorating cosmic order finds a parallel in a very different culture, where a ruler chose not to carve a gate to the sky, but to bury a hill under a mountain of earth, creating a resting place that would become a legend. The silent legion of terracotta soldiers is merely the outer guard. Deep beneath a vast, grassy mound in central China lies the true prize, the unopened tomb of Qin Shi Huang himself. This earthen pyramid, still largely untouched by modern excavation, is perhaps the greatest archaeological secret on Earth. Ancient historians, writing a century after the emperor's passing, described a subterranean palace of unimaginable splendor. They wrote of a miniature universe created for his afterlife, complete with ceilings inlaid with pearls to mimic the stars, and vast-scale models of his kingdom's rivers and oceans, flowing with shimmering mercury. The accounts even warn of deadly crossbows, set to trigger automatically against any intruder, a final, eternal defense for the first emperor. For generations, these stories were dismissed as myth, the fanciful exaggerations of later chroniclers. Then modern science intervened. Geophysical surveys of the tomb mound have repeatedly detected startlingly high concentrations of mercury in the soil, a signature that matches the ancient texts with uncanny precision. This single finding transforms the legend into a potential reality. It suggests the stories of mercury rivers may be based on truth, revealing a level of chemical knowledge and ambitious funerary practice that stuns the imagination. The implications of opening this tomb are staggering. It could contain libraries of bamboo scrolls lost to time, artworks that redefine early Chinese aesthetics, and technological marvels that would rewrite entire chapters on engineering and cosmology. The Terracotta Army, for all its grandeur, would be revealed as merely the welcome committee for a much greater treasure. Yet the tomb remains sealed, a deliberate choice by Chinese authorities and archaeologists. The reasons are a mix of profound respect and practical caution. There are major concerns about preservation, fearing that exposing artifacts sealed for over 2 millennia to modern air could cause immediate and irreversible damage. There are also significant ethical considerations about disturbing a royal resting place of such cultural and national significance. So the pyramid sits, a time capsule of incalculable value, its secrets pressing against the earth, waiting for a future generation with the technology and the wisdom to peer inside without causing loss. It is a humbling reminder that some of history's most profound rewrites are still buried, patiently holding their truth in the dark. This idea of a single, sealed chamber holding transformative secrets finds a strange parallel in a very different kind of relic, one not made of jade or bronze, but of stone and bone, a fossil that gave birth to a monstrous legend. The unopened tomb of Qin Shi Huang holds its secrets in darkness, but another grave, far smaller and already opened, has illuminated a forgotten world with startling clarity. In 2015, near the legendary palace of Nestor in Pylos, Greece, archaeologists uncovered a simple, undisturbed shaft tomb. Inside lay the skeleton of a single man, buried around 1450 years before the Common Era. He was not interred in a grand chamber, But this single individual, now called the Griffin Warrior, was accompanied by a treasure that has rewritten our understanding of the early Greek Bronze Age. The tomb held over 1,500 artifacts, a breathtaking collection of personal wealth and artistry. There were gold rings intricately engraved with scenes of combat and ritual, delicate ivory combs, bronze weapons with their wooden handles long gone, and strands of precious beads. But one object stood out, a sealstone carved from agate, barely an inch and a half wide. When researchers cleaned it and examined it under a microscope, they gasped. The detail was microscopic, masterful. It depicted a warrior in the heat of battle, plunging his sword into an opponent, the muscles taut, the movement frozen in stone with a realism that would not be seen again in art for 1,000 years. The craftsmanship was so fine that some lines are only a millimeter thick, requiring a magnifying lens to carve, a technology not believed to exist at the time. This was not the era of the great Mycenaean palaces like those at Mycenae or Turin, which would rise to power centuries later. This was the dawn of that civilization. The Griffin Warrior's tomb proves that the roots of Greek sophistication, artistry, and complex trade networks ran much deeper than anyone knew. The wealth of goods, with materials sourced from across the Mediterranean, speaks of a powerful, connected elite operating long before the age of Homeric legends. This single grave provides an intimate portrait of a man at the very foundation of European civilization, not as a mythic king, but as a real individual whose personal adornments tell a story of a world already rich, connected, and astonishingly skilled. From the personal riches of a single warrior, we shift our gaze to an entire city, where personal stories were not preserved by careful burial, but by a single, catastrophic act of nature. The Griffin Warrior's tomb captures a single life in exquisite detail, but an entire city can be captured in a single, terrible breath. The eruption of Mount Vesuvius in the year 79 was a profound human loss, but it created a unique kind of time capsule, preserving two Roman towns, Pompeii and Herculaneum, in a state of suspended animation. The volcanic ash and superheated gas that swept down the mountainside did more than bury these communities. It fossilized the rhythm of daily life in an instant. In Herculaneum, the intense pyroclastic surges carbonized organic materials, turning wooden beds, doors, and even food on the table into fragile charcoal, preserving their exact shapes. Most astonishingly, in a villa thought to belong to a Roman statesman, an entire library of papyrus scrolls was baked solid by the heat, their text sealed inside, a collection of ancient thought waiting for modern technology to gently unroll and read them. In nearby Pompeii, the falling ash created hollow spaces around the forms of those who did not escape. When archaeologists later poured plaster into these voids, they revealed the heartbreaking final postures of individuals, families, and even animals, capturing a moment of profound and personal history. These sites have done more than any history book to rewrite our understanding of the Roman world. They provide a minute-by-minute snapshot of social and economic life. We can walk into bakeries with loaves still in the ovens, read political graffiti scrawled on walls, and see the vibrant frescoes that decorated even modest homes, revealing a society that valued art, commerce, and community in intimate, tangible ways. The tragedy of Vesuvius gave us a gift of unparalleled clarity, freezing a bustling world in its tracks and allowing us to step directly into its streets, shops, and homes nearly 2,000 years later. This intimate view of a society in motion stands in stark contrast to another artifact, one not designed for living in place, but for navigating the vast, open emptiness between them. The frozen streets of Pompeii show us a world in place, but the broken timbers of a shipwreck show us a world in motion. In the deep blue waters off the coast of Uluburun, Turkey, lie the scattered remains of a single merchant vessel that sank around 1,300 years before the Common Era. When archaeologists meticulously excavated this Bronze Age shipwreck, they uncovered far more than a maritime accident. They found a floating atlas of the ancient Mediterranean, a cargo hold that rewrote the economic history of an entire age. This was not a royal barge or a warship, but a working trader, and its inventory reads like a manifest of a globalized world. There were 10 tons of copper ingots shaped like ox hides mined in Cyprus. There were ingots of precious tin, likely from distant Anatolia or beyond, the two metals that when combined would form the bronze that gave the era its name. But the ship carried more than raw materials. It held gleaming glass ingots from Mesopotamia, jars of fragrant terebinth resin, logs of precious ebony wood from tropical Africa, and exquisite ivory tusks. There was Canaanite jewelry, Mycenaean pottery, and even a golden scarab inscribed with the name of the Egyptian queen Nefertiti. This single vessel connected at least 7 major cultures in a web of commerce that stretched from the Baltic to the Nile. The Uluburun Shipwreck is the oldest known evidence of such sophisticated, long-distance maritime trade. It reveals a late Bronze Age Mediterranean that was not a collection of isolated kingdoms, but a tightly knit network of interdependent economies. Artisans in Greece depended on Cypriot copper. Egyptian pharaohs adorned themselves with Nubian gold and Lebanese cedar, and merchants navigated by the stars to bring these goods to distant ports. This ship is a snapshot of a system at its peak, a system of astonishing complexity and reach that would, not long after this voyage, mysteriously and catastrophically collapse. The wreck forces us to see this ancient world not as a series of separate chapters in a history book, but as a single, interconnected story of resource, ambition, and fragile connection. It shows us a prototype of our own globalized supply chains, thriving over 3,000 years ago, and its silent fate on the seafloor whispers a timeless lesson about the vulnerability of even the most advanced networks. This profound interconnectedness suggests movements and migrations on a scale we are only beginning to map, journeys that may have begun not across seas, but through the hidden passages of a single cave. Those ancient trade routes connected continents, but the first steps on a new continent were not made by merchants, they were made by children. In the stark white expanse of New Mexico's White Sands National Park, researchers made a discovery that quietly erased a foundational chapter of American history. Preserved in the hardened mud of an ancient lakebed, they found a trail of fossilized human footprints. These were not the prints of mythic hunters or great leaders. They were the footprints of teenagers and children, some even showing the tracks of a toddler being carried, its tiny feet occasionally brushing the ground. The sheer humanity of the scene is poignant, a fleeting moment of play or travel from an unimaginably distant past. But the scientific implications are seismic. Using radiocarbon dating on seeds embedded in the same sediment layers, researchers determined these footprints were made between 21,000 and 23,000 years ago. This date is a thunderclap. For decades, the dominant model for the peopling of the Americas was the Clovis first theory, which argued that the first humans crossed the Bering Land Bridge from Siberia into Alaska only after the last Ice Age's glaciers retreated around 13,000 years ago. The White Sands footprints are not just a few centuries older, they are thousands of years older. They place small bands of humans deep in what is now New Mexico during the height of the last glacial maximum, a time when massive ice sheets were thought to have made the interior corridors of North America impassable. This single, tangible piece of evidence, more personal than any stone tool, forces a complete rewrite of the continent's prehistory. It powerfully supports alternative theories of much earlier migrations, perhaps along a Pacific coastal route, using boats to skirt the ice. The footprints are a humble, undeniable truth pressed into the earth. They tell us that the story of humanity in the Americas is far older, more complex, and more deeply rooted than our textbooks ever allowed. It is a story that began not with spear points, but with the simple, muddy steps of a child, a moment of ordinary life that has permanently changed our understanding of an entire hemisphere's past. From these intimate footprints in the mud, we turn to a far more formal and deliberate record, one pressed not into earth, but into thousands of tablets of clay. Those footprints are a silent record of movement, but the written word captures the full voice of a civilization. In the mid-1970s, Italian archaeologists working at the ancient site of Tel Marduk in northern Syria made a discovery that would fill a critical blank space on the map of the early world. Beneath the ruins of a royal palace, they uncovered an archive, not a handful of tablets, but a library of over 20,000 cuneiform tablets, perfectly preserved when the palace was destroyed by fire around 2250 years before the Common Era. The fire had baked the clay documents hard, saving them for millennia. These were the Ebla tablets. At first, the script was a mystery, but scholars soon realized the tablets were written in a previously unknown Semitic language, now called Eblate. This was not a minor dialect, it was the sophisticated administrative language of a major kingdom that history had completely forgotten. The tablets revealed Ebla as a powerful, literate city-state at the heart of a vast commercial empire. Its merchants traded in textiles, metals, and timber across the Near East, from Anatolia to Mesopotamia. The archive contained meticulous records of treaties, diplomatic letters to other kings, and detailed accounts of taxes and tributes, painting a picture of a complex, bureaucratic state operating with stunning efficiency. But the true historical shockwave came from the tablets' extensive lexical lists and geographic references. They provided a dictionary of words and places, effectively creating a snapshot of the Bronze Age world. Most astonishingly, they included the names of cities like Sodom and Gomorrah, places known only from later biblical texts, suggesting these names and their associated stories had roots in a much older, shared cultural memory of the region. The discovery of Ebla did more than just add another ancient city to the list. It violently rewrote the political and linguistic history of the early Bronze Age. Before its discovery, the narrative of early civilization was dominated by Egypt and Sumer. Ebla proved there was a third major power, a Semitic kingdom of equal sophistication operating in Syria, with its own rich literary and diplomatic traditions. It forced historians to redraw the map of influence and interaction, showing a world already densely connected by diplomacy and trade over 4,000 years ago. The fire that destroyed the palace intended to erase Ebla, but instead it immortalized its voice, allowing a lost kingdom to speak across the ages and reclaim its rightful place in our story. Their colossal heads stare inland, eternal sentinels on a remote volcanic shore. The moai of Rapa Nui, or Easter Island, are some of the most recognizable and mysterious monuments on Earth. Carved from compressed volcanic ash between 1250 and 1500 of the Common Era, these towering figures were long seen as the tragic folly of a lost people, a society that supposedly deforested its own island in a reckless obsession to build statues, leading to starvation and collapse. Modern archaeology has completely rewritten this grim parable, revealing a story not of failure, but of breathtaking ingenuity and resilience. For generations, we only saw the moai from the shoulders up. Excavations in recent decades have uncovered a startling truth. The statues have bodies, buried up to their necks in sediment over centuries. These torsos are covered in intricate, previously unknown petroglyphs, carvings of crescent shapes thought to represent the canoes of their ancestors. This discovery alone transformed the moai from simple heads into complete ceremonial figures, each one a canvas of cultural memory. The engineering challenges only deepen the wonder. How did a people without wheels or large animals move these multi-ton giants across miles of rugged terrain? The answer lies in the island's very landscape. Researchers have mapped a network of prepared roads, and experiments suggest the moai were walked upright in a rocking motion, using ropes and human power in a carefully coordinated ritual of movement. This was not brute force, but a sophisticated communal ballet of physics and faith. Then there are the pukao, the giant cylindrical topknots of red scoria stone that crown some of the statues. These massive stones, some weighing over 10 tons, were rolled up ramps and placed atop the already erected moai, a feat of logistics that speaks to a highly organized and motivated society. The revised narrative is one of adaptation, not annihilation. Evidence shows the Rapa Nui people practiced sustainable rock gardening to enrich the soil, managed their resources carefully for centuries, and the moai themselves were a central part of a complex ancestor veneration system that bound communities to their land. Their decline was likely influenced by the arrival of Europeans who brought devastating outside pressures. The moai, therefore, are not tombstones for a foolish culture. They are monuments to a people who mastered their isolation, who turned their entire island into a sacred landscape of stone, and who expressed their identity and beliefs on a scale meant to echo for eternity. This mastery over stone and landscape for spiritual and political purpose finds a stark parallel in a very different kind of mastery, one driven not by faith, but by sheer economic necessity, deep within a mountain of green stone. The monumental moai were carved from a single kind of stone, but the wealth of empires was dug from a mountain of many. In the sun-baked hills of southwestern Spain, the Rio Tinto mines present a landscape that feels less like an archaeological site and more like a glimpse of another planet. The ground is stained in surreal shades of crimson, ochre, and deep turquoise, colors born from the oxidation of iron and other metals leaching into the acidic water. This is not a natural wonder. It is the world's oldest and most enduring industrial scar, a testament to human hunger for metal that began over 5,000 years ago. The first to tap its wealth were the mysterious Tartessians, a people often linked to the biblical land of Tarshish, who mined here for copper and silver. But it was under the Romans 2,000 years ago that Rio Tinto became the economic engine of an empire. The scale of their operation is almost incomprehensible. They moved mountains, literally, using armies of laborers and a system of hydraulic engineering that rivaled their aqueducts. They deployed water under high pressure to blast away hillsides in a technique called hushing, exposing rich veins of ore. They left behind vast artificial canyons and slag heaps that still dominate the horizon. The silver extracted here funded Rome's legions, minted its coins, and fueled its extravagant economy. Rio Tinto rewrites history by revealing the industrial heart that beat beneath the marble facade of classical civilization. This was not small-scale artisanal mining. It was systematic, large-scale extraction that required advanced geology, complex logistics, and a brutal, relentless consumption of human and environmental capital. The poisoned, vividly colored rivers are not a modern tragedy. They are an ancient one, showing that pre-industrial societies were capable of altering their planet on a profound and lasting scale, long before the smokestacks of the 19th century rose. This site forces us to see antiquity not as a time of harmony with nature, but as an era of ambitious, transformative industry, where the pursuit of metal could reshape a landscape for millennia. From this vast, open wound in the earth that powered an empire, we turn to a single, sealed chamber that held the remains of a lone individual, a discovery that wove together two worlds in a tapestry of silk and bone. The vibrant, acidic rivers of Rio Tinto speak of empires built on metal, but the silent, dry sands of another desert tell a story written in human form. In the relentless aridity of the Taklamakan Desert within China's remote Tarim Basin, the earth has performed a different kind of preservation. Here, the sand gave up not ore but people. Discovered in the late 20th century, these were mummies, but unlike the carefully prepared royal figures of Egypt, these individuals were preserved naturally by the extreme dryness and salty soil. They lay as if sleeping, their features startlingly clear. They had high noses, deep-set eyes, and light-colored hair, distinctly Caucasoid in appearance. They date from as early as 1800 years before the Common Era to around 200 years after, a span of 2 millennia. This physical fact alone is a historical thunderclap. It places people of Western Eurasian descent in the heart of Asia, thousands of years before the documented travels of Marco Polo or even the Han Dynasty's Silk Road diplomacy. But the story is woven into the very clothes they wore. Their bodies were dressed in brilliantly colored woolen tunics, leggings, and cloaks, some in striking patterns of plaids and twills that look unmistakably like Celtic tartans from ancient Europe. One famous mummy, known as the Churchen Man, wears a vivid red tunic and leggings with intricate decorative lines. Another, the Beauty of Lulan, has a simple yet elegant woven cap. These are not the silks we associate with ancient China, but textiles that speak of a different homeland, a different craft tradition carried across unimaginable distances. Their existence rewrites the early chapters of Central Asian history completely. This was not an empty, isolated corridor. It was a vibrant, ancient melting pot, a crossroads where East and West met and mingled centuries, even millennia, before the official Silk Road was named. These individuals were likely part of early Indo-European speaking groups like the Tocharians, who migrated eastward, bringing their language, their weaving techniques, and their genes into what is now Western China. They are silent, perfect proof that the exchange of goods, ideas, and people across Eurasia is a story far older and more deeply rooted than our history books ever acknowledged. The Taklamakan mummies are a poignant reminder that human movement and cultural fusion are not modern inventions, but the very fabric of our ancient past, preserved in wool and skin under a boundless desert sky. This profound evidence of early cross-cultural connection finds a parallel in a different kind of discovery, one that reveals not the movement of people, but the birth of a fundamental human concept, a system for quantifying the world itself. The Taklamakan mummies reveal a world already woven together, but the very threads of that connection begin with something far more fundamental, the human mind counting the days. In a cave in the mountains of what is now Eswatini, a simple baboon bone tells a story of profound intellectual dawn. Known as the Lubombo bone, this fragment of a fibula is small enough to hold in your palm, yet it carries a message from 43,000 years ago. Along its length are 29 clearly, deliberately carved notches. This is not random scarring or decorative etching. The spacing is regular, the marks intentional. To the archaeologists who study it, this humble object is a thunderclap of cognitive history. It is widely considered the oldest known mathematical artifact in the world. What were those 29 marks for? The most compelling theory is that they represent a lunar calendar, a tally of the days in a moon cycle. Another possibility is that it was a simple counting stick, perhaps tracking game, seasons, or menstrual cycles. The specific purpose may be lost, but the implication is crystal clear. Long before cities, before writing, before metal, the human mind was already engaging in abstract notation. It was observing patterns in nature, quantifying them, and creating a physical record to hold that knowledge across time. This pushes the origins of mathematical thought back tens of thousands of years earlier than the clay accounting tablets of Mesopotamia. The Lubombo bone rewrites the history of the intellect itself. It shows that the capacity for complex, symbolic thought, for seeing the world in numbers and cycles, is not a product of civilization, but its very precursor. That ancient individual holding a bone and a sharp stone was not merely surviving, They were calculating, predicting, and attempting to impose order on the vast, mysterious flow of time. This cognitive leap from observation to notation is one of humanity's first and most crucial steps out of instinct and into the realm of science and planning. It is the quiet, foundational spark from which all later accounting, astronomy, and engineering would eventually flame. From this earliest known record of a counted cycle, we move to a civilization that took the concept of order and planning to an astonishing extreme, building not just calendars, but an entire city upon the rhythmic pulse of a lake. A city built on the rhythmic pulse of a lake is not a metaphor, it was a reality. Across the Alpine foothills from Switzerland to Slovenia, the quiet waters of lakes and marshes have cradled a secret for millennia. These are the pile-dwelling villages, communities that chose not to build on solid ground, but to construct their homes on wooden stilts driven deep into the soft lake bed, creating entire villages hovering above the water's surface. Dating from around 5,000 to 500 years before the Common Era, these settlements were known only through vague legends until modern archaeology began to peer beneath the peat and still water. What they found was not just foundations, but a time capsule of almost miraculous preservation. The waterlogged, oxygen-poor environment acted as a perfect seal, protecting materials that vanish without a trace at dry land sites. Here, wood does not rot, textiles do not disintegrate, and even the remains of a Neolithic meal can be found perfectly intact. The level of detail is breathtaking. Archaeologists have recovered finely woven baskets, wooden bowls with the carver's tool marks still visible, delicate flaxen clothing, and fishing nets knotted with skill. They have found wheels from simple carts, the earliest evidence of the wagon in Europe, and long wooden bows that speak of both hunting and defense. Most intimately, they uncover the very foodstuffs of daily life, charred grains of wheat, dried apples, and even a piece of Neolithic bread forgotten beside a hearth. These villages rewrite the history of early European farming communities with a clarity that stone tools and pottery shards alone could never provide. They reveal a society of sophisticated carpenters and farmers who managed their environment with precision, cultivating orchards, herding animals, and trading across the Alps. The stilt house settlements were not isolated refuges, but well-connected, thriving communities that chose the lake for its defensive benefits, its rich fishing, and perhaps for the spiritual significance of living between earth and water. They show a Neolithic world already rich with technology, art, and domestic comfort, a picture painted not in stone, but in preserved wood and woven fiber, offering us a window into the daily rhythm of a world 5,000 years gone. To move from these perfectly preserved villages to a single, inscribed stone might seem a step from the tangible to the cryptic, but that stone would perform a different kind of preservation, one not of objects but of a voice itself. The perfectly preserved villages of the Alpine lakes speak through their tangible objects, but the greatest voices of the past are often locked in symbols we cannot read. For centuries, the monuments of Egypt stood in majestic silence. Their walls were covered in intricate, beautiful carvings of birds, eyes, and serpents, a script so ornate it was considered purely ceremonial, a secret language of the priests. The meaning of these hieroglyphs had been utterly lost for over 1,000 years, turning one of history's most prolific civilizations into a gallery of magnificent but mute statues. All of that changed with a single slab of dark stone, stumbled upon by French soldiers in 1799 while rebuilding a fort near the Egyptian town of Rosetta. This was not a golden treasure but a granodiorite stele, a fragment of a much larger decree. Its value lay not in its material, but in its message, repeated 3 times in 3 different scripts. At the top, the sacred and mysterious hieroglyphs. In the middle, the Demotic script, the everyday cursive of ancient Egypt. And at the bottom, ancient Greek, a language scholars of the time could already read. The Rosetta Stone was not a mystery in itself, it was a key. It presented a clear, tantalizing challenge, the same royal decree from King Ptolemy V, issued in 196 before the Common Era, written in both a known language and two unknown ones. For 23 years, linguists across Europe wrestled with the puzzle. The breakthrough came from a French prodigy named Jean-François Champollion. He suspected correctly that hieroglyphs were not just symbolic pictures, but a complex system incorporating both phonetic sounds and ideographic meaning. By comparing the Greek names like Ptolemy and Cleopatra with the cartouches, the oval rings that enclosed royal names in the hieroglyphic section, he began to match symbols to sounds. In 1822, he announced his success. The stone had been cracked. The effect was nothing short of revolutionary. The Rosetta Stone did not simply translate a few words, it flung open the doors to 3,000 years of Egyptian history. Suddenly, temple walls, papyrus scrolls, and tomb inscriptions could speak. The silent pharaohs gained biographies, their wars and treaties entered the historical record. Religious hymns, poetry, administrative documents, and medical texts poured forth, transforming Egypt from a land of enigmatic ruins into a fully voiced civilization with documented thoughts, laws, and stories. This single artifact created the entire modern discipline of Egyptology and set the standard for all future archaeological decipherment, proving that the greatest treasure is often not gold, but a dictionary written in stone. With the voice of a civilization finally recovered, the search turns to the silent, sealed resting place of a single king, a discovery that would not speak with words but with a staggering, golden whisper. The gold that unlocked Egypt's voice was monumental, but the gold that confirmed a legend was found in a simple, unassuming mound. For centuries, the small Greek town of Vergina sat quietly in the shadow of its more famous neighbors. Its great earthen tumulus was just another hill, a feature of the landscape long assumed to be a natural formation or the grave of a minor local noble. In 1977, archaeologist Manolis Andronikos began to excavate it. What he found inside would silence all doubt and rewrite the archaeology of an empire. Within the great tumulus were several tombs, but one stood out, miraculously untouched by looters across 23 centuries. This was a royal Macedonian burial of staggering opulence. The centerpiece was a small, heavy chest, a larnax made of solid gold. Upon its lid, hammered with breathtaking skill, was the radiant 16-point star of the Argead dynasty, the emblem of Macedonian kings. Inside this golden casket were the cremated remains of a man, wrapped in a purple and gold cloth, a color reserved for royalty. The tomb was an arsenal and a treasury. There was a suit of magnificent armor, a gilded ceremonial shield, and an iron helmet of such elegant, deadly simplicity it could only belong to a warrior king. Perhaps most telling were the delicate ivory portrait heads found within, miniature sculptures that bore the unmistakable marks of a life lived fiercely. One showed a man with a scar over his right eye, and evidence of trauma to the bone around the eye socket. Ancient historians wrote that Philip II of Macedon, father of Alexander the Great, had lost his right eye to an arrow in battle. The evidence from the star on the chest to the portrait and the historical wound converged with overwhelming force. This was Philip. The discovery was a seismic event in classical archaeology. Before Vergina, the glorious Macedonian court existed primarily in texts, a realm described by ancient biographers but lacking a physical heart. This tomb provided that heart, beating with tangible proof. It revealed the astonishing artistry and wealth that flowed through the Macedonian elite, just as Philip was unifying Greece and preparing the conquest that his son would unleash upon the world. The artifacts were not mere decorations, they were instruments of power and identity, showing a culture that blended raw martial prowess with exquisite aesthetic refinement. This unlooted chamber offered a direct line of sight to the very dawn of the Hellenistic age, confirming the historical scale of Philip's kingdom and gifting us with the personal effects of the man who forged the weapon that Alexander would wield. From the definitive, sealed tomb of the father, the search turns inevitably to the legendary, lost city of the sun, a place of myth that dared to become real. The golden larnax of Philip II was sealed in a Macedonian hill, but the legendary capital of his descendants now lies silent beneath the Mediterranean. Off the modern coast of Alexandria, Egypt, the sea hides a ghost. This is not a shipwreck but a drowned city, the remains of the Portus Magnus, the great harbor that was the pulsing heart of the Ptolemaic kingdom. Due to a series of devastating earthquakes and gradual land subsidence over centuries, the royal quarter, the palace complex of Cleopatra and her ancestors, slid inexorably beneath the waves. For nearly 2 millennia, its grandeur existed only in the glowing accounts of ancient historians. Then, underwater archaeologists began to map the silt-covered seabed. What their sonar and careful hands revealed is a museum without walls. The waters are scattered with monumental fragments of a lost world. Colossal statues of Ptolemaic kings and queens, toppled from their pedestals, stare sightlessly upward. Granite sphinxes, guardians of a now-vanished shoreline, rest on the sand. Most evocative of all are the massive stone blocks, some weighing over 70 tons, believed to be fallen pieces of the legendary pharaoh's lighthouse, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. These submerged ruins are doing more than just confirming old stories. They are actively rewriting the map and our understanding of the city's scale and splendor. Each recovered artifact is a coordinate in a lost landscape of power. They allow us to trace the outlines of marbled promenades, royal docks, and the very courtyards where scholars like Euclid and Archimedes might have walked. This sunken district offers a direct, tangible connection to the Hellenistic capital that was a dazzling fusion of Greek learning and Egyptian tradition, a center of gravity for the ancient mind. The ongoing search for Cleopatra's tomb somewhere in this submerged or adjacent area adds a layer of profound historical longing to the site. To dive here is to swim through the drowned memory of an empire, where every stone block whispers of a city that aimed to be the center of the world, and whose physical heart now beats only in the quiet, dark blue of the sea. This preservation by water, locking away a city's core, finds a strange parallel in the preservation of a very different kind of knowledge, not in stone under the sea, but on folded bark in a highland cave. That library of bark paper pages survived against all odds. While the royal quarter of Alexandria sleeps beneath the sea, another library of sorts escaped the flames of conquest on dry land. The Dresden Codex is a fragile, screen-fold book, its pages made from the inner bark of the fig tree, coated with a smooth layer of lime plaster to create a brilliant white writing surface. It dates to the 11th or 12th century of the Common Era, making it the oldest surviving book written in the Americas. Its very existence is a miracle, one of only a handful of Maya codices to survive the deliberate destruction of indigenous knowledge during the Spanish conquest, likely because it was sent to Europe as a curiosity decades earlier. For a long time, Western scholars viewed the Maya as a mysterious, fallen people obsessed with time and sacrifice. The Dresden Codex rewrote that simplistic narrative by revealing the true engine of that obsession, a staggering scientific intellect. When researchers finally deciphered its complex glyphs and numerical bars and dots, they found not just myths but precise mathematical tables. The Codex contains incredibly accurate almanacs for tracking the cycles of Venus, the morning and evening star, which the Maya considered a deity of paramount importance. Their calculations for its 584-day synodic period are off by mere minutes over centuries. It includes tables for predicting solar and lunar eclipses, mapping out dangerous periods they believed were governed by malevolent forces. These were not guesses, they were the product of generations of meticulous observation, recorded in a positional numerical system that included the concept of zero, a mathematical leap the Romans never achieved. This single book transforms our understanding of Mesoamerica. It proves the Maya developed a written, scientific tradition wholly independent of Europe or Asia, a tradition that used advanced arithmetic and astronomy not merely for curiosity, but to organize their entire ritual and agricultural world, to commune with the gods of time itself. The Codex is a bridge connecting their towering pyramid observatories to the pages of a portable manual, a testament to a civilization that sought to hold the cosmos in their hands through numbers and paint. This drive to build in harmony with celestial power finds a parallel in a fortress whose stones seem to defy not just enemies, but the very logic of their own construction. The Maya tracked Venus with a portable codex, but the Inca moved mountains to build a calendar of stone. Perched on a steep hillside high above the ancient Inca capital of Cusco, the fortress of Sacsayhuaman is not a structure you simply look at, you feel its weight in your bones. Its most famous feature is a series of 3 zigzagging terraced walls, built from blocks of limestone so colossal they seem borrowed from the realm of giants. Some of these stones stand over 28 feet tall and weigh more than 120 tons. They are larger than the monoliths at Stonehenge. Yet the true wonder is not their size but their fit. These polygonal blocks, each with multiple angled facets, are joined together without a single drop of mortar. The precision is so absolute, so flawless, that the seams between the stones are tighter than a razor blade. You cannot slip a piece of paper between them. This is not simple stacking. It is a 3-dimensional stone puzzle of mind-bending complexity, engineered to withstand the violent earthquakes that frequently shake the Andes. The stones do not just sit on one another, they interlock, dancing together so that when the earth trembles, the entire wall settles and resettles without cracking. How was this achieved? The Inca had no iron, no steel, no draft animals, and no knowledge of the wheel. The standard explanations of levers, ramps, and ropes feel inadequate before such a scale and such perfection. Some researchers point to the possibility of using sound or specific plant extracts to soften the stone, though these theories remain speculative. The more profound truth lies in the relationship between the builders and their material. The Inca did not conquer the landscape, they conversed with it. They understood the character of each stone, quarrying it with a combination of fire, water, and wedges, then patiently shaping it through abrasion with harder stones, a process requiring generations of communal labor and an almost spiritual patience. Sacsayhuaman rewrites the narrative of pre-Columbian engineering. It was not merely a military stronghold, but a ceremonial center and a profound statement of power, a way of binding the very bones of the earth into the identity of the empire. It demonstrates a mastery of material and a symbiotic relationship with the environment that modern engineers can scarcely replicate with all their machinery. This fortress is a lesson in patience, a monument built not in years but in lifetimes, where the goal was not just to build a wall, but to become one with the mountain. From this staggering feat of shaping hard stone, we turn to a far more delicate canvas, where ancient artists used the soft walls of a cave to capture the fleeting essence of life itself. The walls of Lascaux are not a simple gallery, they are a sanctuary of movement frozen in time. In 1940, 4 teenage boys and their dogs stumbled into a hole in the ground near the village of Montignac, France, and found themselves in a cathedral of the ancient world. Their lantern light flickered across a breathtaking panorama, a bestiary of the Ice Age painted with a vitality that feels almost alive. Here were herds of horses captured in mid-gallop, their manes flowing. Massive aurochs, the wild ancestors of cattle, stood with a powerful, looming presence. Elegant stags seemed to swim across the stone, their antlers like underwater branches. These were not crude stick figures or simple outlines. The artists of Lascaux, working 17,000 years ago, used the natural contours of the rock to give their animals volume and dimension. They employed techniques like shading and perspective, creating a stunning sense of motion and realism that would not be seen again in European art for thousands of years. The discovery was a thunderclap for archaeology. Before Lascaux, the prevailing view of Paleolithic humans was of grim survivors, focused solely on the next meal and shelter. These paintings shattered that narrow image. They revealed a people with a rich inner life, capable of complex symbolic thought, sophisticated artistic technique, and profound spiritual yearning. The very location of the art, deep within the labyrinthine cave, far from any living area, suggests these spaces were sacred. Entering them was likely a ritual journey, and the act of painting itself may have been a form of communion with the spirit of the animals they hunted and revered. Lascaux became the benchmark, the Rosetta Stone for understanding the cognitive and artistic dawn of our species. It proved that the need to create meaning, to tell stories, and to connect with forces greater than oneself is not a product of civilization, but its very source. This deep, universal human drive to seek connection in sacred spaces did not begin in France. For that origin, we must travel much further east, to a windswept hill in Turkey where humanity first gathered to build not for shelter, but for the soul. The rooftops of Çatalhöyük were its streets, a landscape of human connection built not outward but inward. This vast Neolithic town in central Turkey thrived for nearly 2,000 years, from around 7,500 to 5,700 years before the Common Era, and it presents a vision of early urban life unlike any other. There were no roads, no lanes, no central plaza. Instead, hundreds of rectangular mud brick houses were packed tightly together like cells in a honeycomb, sharing walls. To enter your home, you climbed a ladder through a hole in the roof. Life unfolded on these flat rooftops, a communal terrain for socializing, working, and looking out over a landscape teeming with wild bulls and fields of early wheat. The architecture itself whispers of a social revolution. The striking absence of obvious palaces, temples, or grand administrative buildings suggests a society with a remarkably flat hierarchy. Çatalhöyük seems to have been organized without a ruling elite, a large community of perhaps several thousand people who managed their affairs through shared ritual and kinship rather than centralized authority. This finding alone rewrites the standard model of the Neolithic Revolution, which assumed that agriculture inevitably led to social stratification and monumental architecture for the powerful. Here, the monument was the community itself. Inside these windowless homes, the walls tell a more intimate story. They are adorned with vibrant paintings, considered among the earliest known landscape art, depicting the erupting Hasan Dag volcano on the horizon. Elaborate plaster reliefs show leopards, bears, and the iconic female figure often called the seated woman of Çatalhöyük, a symbol of abundance and possibly a revered ancestor. Bull skulls or bacrania were embedded in walls and pillars, their horns coated in plaster, creating a powerful, recurring motif that blended the wild and the domestic. The people buried their loved ones beneath the plaster floors of their homes, keeping generations physically connected within the domestic space. Çatalhöyük forces a profound rethink. It shows that the first great experiment in settled life could prioritize spiritual depth, artistic expression, and social cohesion over displays of individual power. This was not a primitive step toward civilization, but a sophisticated, alternative path that flourished for millennia, a testament to a human community that found its strength in closeness, both architectural and social. If this town reveals a world turning inward, the next discovery suggests a world looking outward, across oceans we thought were impassable barriers. The rooftops of Çatalhöyük looked inward, but the faces of the Olmec look out across millennia with a silent, stony gaze. In the humid lowlands of the Mexican Gulf Coast, scattered across ancient ceremonial grounds, rest some of the most imposing and enigmatic artifacts of the ancient Americas. The Olmec colossal heads are exactly that, colossal, carved from single, gigantic blocks of volcanic basalt. Each one stands up to 11 feet tall and weighs many tons, depicting a man with a stern, powerful expression, full lips, and wide, flat nose. They wear what appears to be a protective helmet, each one uniquely decorated, suggesting these were not generic gods, but portraits of specific, powerful rulers. When the first of these heads was unearthed in the 19th century, it presented a puzzle that did not fit the established story. At the time, scholarly focus was on the magnificent Maya cities and the later Aztec Empire. This massive, sophisticated sculpture clearly predated both, yet it belonged to no known civilization. Its discovery and the subsequent excavation of Olmec centers like San Lorenzo and La Venta forced a dramatic historical rewrite. Here was a fully formed complex society, flourishing from around 1400 to 400 years before the Common Era, 1,000 years before the classic Maya peak. The Olmec were not a precursor, they were the foundation. They developed monumental architecture, a distinct artistic style featuring wood jaguar motifs, and possibly the earliest writing and calendar systems in the Americas. The heads themselves are monuments to that foundational power. The sheer logistics of their creation boggle the mind. The basalt was quarried from mountains dozens of miles away, requiring the movement of these multi-ton stones without the wheel or draft animals, likely via river raft and human labor over incredible distances. This implies a society with the organizational capacity to command such effort, suggesting a centralized authority, a ruling elite who could commission their own likeness in eternal stone. The Olmec colossal heads did more than add an earlier chapter to Mesoamerican history. They wrote the prologue. They established the region as a cradle of independent innovation, where the template for kingship, monumental art, and cosmic ritual was first carved, not in modest clay, but in the most durable stone imaginable, setting a cultural pattern that would echo for centuries. That human drive to shape the most durable materials leads us from these grounded heads of stone to a small, metallic wanderer that arrived from a realm beyond our world, an object that carries a message from the dawn of the solar system itself. The final navigational tool was not a compass but a crystal held to the sky. In the sagas of the Norse, there are fleeting references to a mysterious solarstein, a sunstone. No physical example has ever been found in a Viking burial, yet this legendary object may explain one of history's greatest maritime puzzles. How did Viking sailors, centuries before the magnetic compass reached Europe, navigate the treacherous, fog-shrouded North Atlantic to reach Iceland, Greenland, and even the shores of North America? The answer may have been in their hands. Modern researchers, analyzing the optical properties of certain transparent crystals found in Scandinavia, have zeroed in on two candidates, cordierite and a particular form of calcite known as Iceland spar. These crystals have a remarkable property: they polarize light. On a completely overcast day, when the sun is a mere bright patch in a uniform gray sky, the light still carries a subtle pattern of polarization invisible to the naked eye. When you look through such a crystal and rotate it, the view through the stone changes in brightness. By finding the point where the crystal darkens most, a skilled user could deduce the exact position of the hidden sun, even at dawn or dusk when it was below the horizon. This was not magic, it was sophisticated applied physics. Experimental archaeologists have successfully used replicas to navigate under dense cloud cover with startling accuracy. This potential sunstone rewrites the history of exploration. It moves the Vikings from being merely bold adventurers who lucked upon new lands to being ingenious technologists who mastered their environment with a tool born from deep observation of light and stone. Their longships were marvels of design, but it was this small, clear crystal that may have been the true key to their world, allowing them to steer by a sun they could not see, turning the featureless ocean into a chart they could read. This quiet genius finding direction in filtered light brings our journey through 40 unexplained finds to a close. Each artifact, from the Antikythera Mechanism to this navigator's crystal, shares a common thread. They are not merely old objects, they are correctives. They arrive from the past like messages in a bottle, each one forcing us to erase a line in the textbook and write a new, more complex and more human story. They tell us that history is not a straight, predictable path from primitive to advanced. It is a landscape of brilliant peaks and forgotten valleys, of technologies lost and rediscovered, of cultures whose full sophistication we are only beginning to grasp. These finds humble our modern arrogance. They remind us that curiosity, ingenuity, and the drive to understand the cosmos are not modern inventions, but ancient, enduring qualities of the human spirit. The next time you look at a star chart, hold a compass, or even glance at a calendar, remember, you are touching ideas that were dreamed, tested, and mastered by minds across millennia. The past is not a closed book, it is an ongoing conversation. And every new discovery is a chance to listen more carefully to what it has been trying to tell us all along. These 40 scattered pieces of evidence are not random. When we step back, they begin to form a pattern, a tapestry woven with threads that repeat across continents and millennia. The first and perhaps most humbling thread is the fragility of knowledge itself. We see it in the silent script of the Indus Valley, in the untranslated Voynich Manuscript, and in the single surviving Antikythera Mechanism. Entire libraries of understanding, languages, and technical manuals can vanish, leaving behind only a cryptic fragment or a lone, inexplicable machine. Civilizations that moved 70-ton stones or charted the stars with crystal could see their methods, their very reasons for being, erased by time, conquest, or environmental shift. This repeated loss teaches us that progress is not a guaranteed forward march. It is a flickering flame passed from hand to hand, vulnerable to being snuffed out, leaving later generations to start the fire all over again. A second brilliant thread is the universal ingenuity of the human problem solver. Faced with a need, our ancestors did not wait for a modern textbook. They observed, experimented, and engineered with the materials at hand. The need to predict seasons led to the Nebra Sky Disk and the Maya's Venus tables. The challenge of urban living sparked the sewers of Mohenjo-Daro and the water management of Angkor. The desire to build the impossible produced the interlocking stones of Sacsayhuaman and the walked moe of Rapa Nui. This ingenuity was not centralized. It bloomed independently in the swamps of the Indus, the deserts of Peru, and the islands of the Mediterranean, proving that the drive to innovate, to shape our environment, is a fundamental human trait, not the invention of any one culture. Then there is the thread of connection, the evidence that the ancient world was far smaller than we imagined. The Uluburun Shipwreck, laden with goods from 7 cultures, the Caucasian mummies of the Taklamakan in Chinese silk, the Mesopotamian glass in a Scandinavian tomb, the Greek astronomical knowledge possibly encoded in a German bronze disc, all whisper the same truth. Trade routes were highways for more than spices and gold. They carried ideas, technologies, artistic styles, and genes. This long-distance contact suggests a proto-globalized world, where a discovery in Egypt might eventually influence a temple plan in Mexico, not through magic, but through the slow, relentless diffusion of knowledge across generations of merchants, migrants, and storytellers. Together, these threads unravel the comforting myth of history as a simple, upward progression from primitive to advanced. The timeline is not a smooth incline. It is a rugged landscape of brilliant peaks and deep valleys. The precision engineering of Göbekli Tepe rises before agriculture. The astronomical computer of Antikythera appears, then vanishes for 1,000 years. A culture masters rust-proof iron, and the formula is forgotten. We see peaks of achievement in art, urban planning, and science that are not surpassed for centuries, if ever. This pattern of peaks and valleys forces a profound humility. It tells us that our current technological moment is not the inevitable pinnacle of human history, but simply another peak, one that future archaeologists may someday puzzle over in their own turn. So what do these 40 mysteries mean for us right now? They are not just curiosities for textbooks, they are correctives for our worldview. They challenge the arrogance of the present, reminding us that our understanding is always provisional, always one discovery away from being rewritten. They expand our sense of human potential, showing that the minds that gazed at the same stars we do were capable of profound artistry, calculation, and cosmic wonder. Most importantly, they transform the past from a static, finished story into a living, breathing conversation. Every artifact is a question waiting to be asked, a voice from the shadows asking us to listen more carefully. The next chapter of history is not just ahead of us, it is still being unearthed piece by puzzling piece from the earth beneath our feet and the deep, patient silence of time. The gears of the Antikythera Mechanism and the footprints in white sands are more than isolated puzzles. They are cracks in a vast, imposing edifice, the wall of established history we thought was solid and complete. With each new discovery, another crack forms, letting in slivers of light that reveal corridors and rooms we never knew existed. This is the true legacy of the unexplained. It does not demolish our understanding, but it forces us to renovate it, to build a larger, more complex, and more wondrous house for the human story. History, we come to see, is not a closed book sitting on a shelf, its final chapter written long ago. It is an ongoing excavation, both of the literal earth and of our own intellect. Every researcher with a trowel, every linguist with a fragment of text, every physicist dating a layer of sediment is part of this grand, collaborative dig. The past is not passive. It is an active participant holding its secrets close until the right question is asked, the right technology is developed, the right mind is ready to listen. These 40 mysteries do more than correct a timeline or add a footnote. They perform a vital, living function. They inspire. The teenager who reads about the Baghdad Battery might be sparked to study electrochemistry. The student who marvels at the Nazca Lines might pursue a career in aerial archaeology or cultural anthropology. The engineer puzzled by Sacsayhuamon might find new solutions in ancient principles of seismic design. Each unanswered question is a beacon calling to the next generation of explorers, scientists, and dreamers, urging them to look closer, dig deeper, and think differently. It is a chain of curiosity stretching from the past into the future. So as we close this particular chapter, this journey through 40 world-altering finds, hold onto that sense of open-ended wonder. The map is not finished, the story is not complete. The next artifact that rewrites everything might be resting in an overlooked museum drawer, buried under a farmer's field, or hidden in plain sight on a sun-baked plateau. It is waiting for the stray glance, the curious mind, the patient hand. What historical certainty will you choose to question next? The journey does not end here. Share your thoughts and the mysteries that captivate you in the comments below, and subscribe to continue delving deeper into the unfolding story of our world.